Yes, you're up already. Great. Uh, well, it's up to this panel to wind up this year's summit. So, Richard, Chase, I hope David is able to wind up and then join as well. And I know, Chase, I was told that you have to jump out in now 17 minutes because you got a conflict. So, thank you for the flexibility in joining us. We'll dive right into the topic and let Dr. Zero Trust talk about Zero Trust. Okay. So maybe quick intro, Chase, if you can we should start with you and then we'll move to Richard.
Sure. So I'm retired Navy. I was a cryptologist. Worked for the government for a while after that. I was a forestry analyst for 4+ years, and then I'm now the chief strategy officer at the Ericom Software.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Chase. Richard?
Sure. Good. I clicked the Zoom mute button, so I'm good. My name is Richard Rushing. I'm CISO for Motorola Mobility. I have responsibility for our parent company, Lenovo, as well. Been in cybersecurity forever, and that's a really long time. I won't date it. My gray beard usually gives it away. On that, I've worked for Fortune 25, Fortune 50 organizations, as well as done several startups on that side of it that's there.
Excellent, thank you. And then probably nobody can do this topic more justice than the two of these gentlemen here, right? We started with what, trust but verify for a long time. That was our mantra, right? We wanted to make sure that we have trusted networks, we have solid perimeters, and then but when we had traffic in, people in, data in, verify. Well, at least we wish we could, and we tried, right? And now we have realized that didn't work or has not given us what we wanted. So we moved to the zero trust model, which I believe has been in place for quite some time. It's just that it is caught on the buzzword now. So Richard, why don't you kick us off on your journey between these two paradigms?
In the world, and I think you bring up a good point, we've always used the term like least privilege as being a foundation architectural component of what we're actually looking for. And zero trust is that exact thing of like, why do things need to talk to the rest of everything in the world? And the answer is they don't. So why don't we impact this? I think zero trust, unfortunately, as you point out, has become a marketing term versus an actual technology term that means different things, because it means some people look at it as an authentication boundary, some people look at it as a networking micro-segmentation function, other people look at it as a combination of those. And I think it really is designed to the same thing of why in this day and age do we have the ability of what I used to call the M&M perimeter, which was like that hard, crunchy shell on the outside. And once you got inside, it's all chocolate. You can go anywhere you want to and everything else. And the attackers do. They compromise one machine and then they compromise an organization. So we see the need. And I think that's part of the journey. But you really have to kind of step back, because you can kind of get sold on certain aspects, but you have to look at it. And I always use kind of the OSI model, the 7 layers from physical all the way up to the application itself, and says, in a zero trust world, I should touch all those layers. Now, depending how my organization is, I can start at the bottom of the stack, or I can move all the way up to and I can start at the top of the stack. The issue is starting from the top down works very well, but it gets more complicated as you go through. If I start at the bottom of the stack, it's really hard to start with because things break. It's very kind of disruptive as you move through the stack. But at the end, as you move it gets easier and easier as you go through. So depending on your organization, if you want to bite off on something that's really hard, you know where to start. If you want to bite off on something that is not so hard and you want to aspect of things around the perimeter, and then go to the next level of the inside, then go to the next level. But I think zero trust has a lot of movement as well as a lot of functionality for a lot of organizations and can disrupt some of the attacks we see today.
Well, that's a pretty broad swath of kind of getting from where we are to now, and let's just expand on that. So Chase, your thought around zero trust and how do we get there, or where we are with it?
Yeah, so I mean, this has been evolving ever since the Jericho Forum came up with the concept of deep perimeterized security. And I mean, those guys were very forward-looking about thinking what we would do when we didn't have the high walls. We've known that the perimeter-based model for security wasn't going to work since 1260 BC when the city of Troy fell. I mean, that's literally the first. I mean, we've known for hundreds of years that this wasn't going to work. How we ever thought it was going to work in the digital space, I'm not exactly sure, but I mean, what we used to call malware, we called it Trojans, right? Because of the city of Troy showed us that model didn't work. Anyway, where we're going with this is really that it becomes more evolutionary around the entity. I used to say users a lot. Now I say entity. And the reason I say that is it's really become very specific around users, devices, accesses, applications, those types of things. And it has to be ephemeral and it has to be transitory. If we do those things and we put it in that perspective and we enable other things such as like out-of-band authentication, biometrics, self-sovereign identity, there's a whole litany of other capabilities. All of a sudden we enable an actual strategy that makes sense. There is no product for zero trust. There is no one ring to rule them all. This is about strategic implementation of the right technologies along the bounds of what will eliminate the adversary's capabilities. And I look at this, the first time I got the concept, I looked at it from the perspective of being a red teamer, being an adversary, and thought, man, if somebody had a zero trust infrastructure, it would really suck for me. And that's kind of how we want to play it, is make it miserable for the attacker.
Yeah, no, that makes definitely a lot of sense, because you have to make it hard on the attackers. You cannot completely prevent getting in. And we just had this incident response and business resiliency panel right before this, right? So why don't you take a little bit of deeper dive into what would be the first couple of steps to get there, when you're moving from this role model?
Yep. So I think the first thing you have to understand is that with the beginning of this, I really need to understand, one, my environment. So I kind of have to understand my entities, as Chase pointed out, my assets as well. If I don't have a good handle on that, zero trust is really going to be really hard, because when you start turning things on, the things that you don't know about all of a sudden break. So it's going to be a continual process if you don't have a good inventory of your environment, or you're not good at asset management that's there. The same as if you have things like shadow IT is kind of thing, or business units standing up their own thing. There's not a centralized repository. So there are some policy shifts when you start doing this, because you're really going to be parts of the ideas of things around that. Now, understand that in today, you probably have things that are zero trust-like in things like wireless authentication and things like that, where, hey, I've already defined where you are. I'm already using certificates. I'm already using a strong form of authentication to get on the wireless network, which gives me access to the wired side. But there's things that you're already doing today that give you that same thing, that you just translate back to the other sides of it. I think you also have to understand, make some critical decisions. Authentication and users are going to be one of those key decision places. How do I want to authenticate? Do I want to use a third party? Do I want to use a SASE environment? Do I want to roll my own? Where do I want to sit there to get people inside the perimeter? How are they coming into the organization? You can use your current VPN if that's what you want to do. You can use another solution. The same would be for the authentication. You can roll your own internally, or you can use something that's on the outside of that. But I think flexibility is one of the keys. So I have to have and build the foundations for these with tools that can dynamically and be able to support different things along the way. If I try to build it in stone and it's there, I'm really dictating the way the rest of the building blocks come into play. And by doing so, you can traverse down a path that will get to a point where this will not work. And that's not good, because you're now spent money, spent effort, spent everything else. I have to back up and turn around and go somewhere else. So I think that's one of the things that I do that. And I think one of the most successful things is It affects everything. It affects everything across the board. So you need to involve the application teams. You need to involve your networking teams, your IT organizations, compliance, all these different things, third-party management. Because if you don't, you're going to lock things out and you're going to have problems and disruptions inside your organization.
Yeah, no, that's definitely right. I mean, in terms of the building blocks and where we are putting together, I think the dynamic is the key word, right? Because we should be ready for change. Chase, to extend that conversation, you mentioned that zero trust is not a technology solution, or it's not just one technology. What would you suggest are the building blocks of a zero trust environment that we should consider?
Well, I think the value of any really good, actually applicable strategy is that there is no single sort of stack that will solve that problem, right? I mean, when you, I do tell people all the time, like, think about this in the realm of your physical health. There are certain things you may or may not be able to do. Doesn't mean that you can't be healthy based on changing some approaches to problems that will make you physically healthier. So that's always something to keep in mind. I think, well, from my perspective, when I look at ZT, I think at the lower end of the maturity curve is you have to have a really good identity and access management solution capability set that will allow you to do things at speed and scale across devices, across infrastructure. I think as you move towards the far end of that spectrum, you start to see more things about optimization of the network, the resources, isolation of the application, moving into the cloud, because the cloud is the last greenfield environment where you can gain more sort of new capabilities that do operate at that speed and scale, and you can age off of a lot of that old stuff and gain the capabilities that will help. And then honestly, lastly, and this is from doing workshops in the space, the most difficult part of this whole thing to actually bound and isolate is the data that we deal with today. Data is very ephemeral, very transitory, very dynamic, especially in a knowledge sort of economy. So that's a very difficult problem to solve that should come far down the road. Does that mean you stop as you get there? No, but it also means solve simple problems first that have relatively binary solutions, and then continually scale up as you get to new capabilities.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important, right? I mean, that making sure that we take care of the basics gives you a big lift than you can typically perceive or appreciate. So thank you, Chase, for that. Uh, Richard, from the industry that you have been representing for a long time, from the technology side as well as manufacturing support, right? How do you see the physical and the logical connection in this zero trust environment?
That's a really good question, because in some ways, some of the new technologies around networking, a lot of the software-defined functionalities, guess what? Well, if it's not integrated directly with the zero trust model, it can break. So a lot of the things that your network team or your operation team has been working towards, you may have to undo or figure out some other way to integrate it into the environment, because it will no longer work in this environment, or you kind of give that's the end of the border for the zero trust model. I can't see where my software-defined local area network or my wide area network it's going to be set up. So how do I pull that data out and make decisions based upon it and things around that? And I think that's more to come, but I think some of those areas are there. I think one of the easiest things to look at is it's a big problem when you start talking about it in any size of organization, and you have components of the networks and the infrastructure to be able to do it. Like factories are a good example. Very static, very straightforward. You have good capabilities on the networking already. You probably already have some level of segmentation in those environments. So overlaying portions of this becomes really straightforward, and you don't have, oh, I have 30,000 people on the outside of the network that need access to the inside of the network. You don't have anybody on the outside of the network. You really have very isolated network that I'm trying to control and see what goes in those cases. So it becomes a great testing ground. In our case, lab environments are great testing grounds where, yeah, we have a bunch of machines that talk back and forth to each other, but they don't need to talk to the whole infrastructure with that. So I can work on those, find what things work, what things break, what don't do it, and then kind of move into the larger general population, sites and everything else. It is very much, I did some early adoption of kind of one of the premier before Zero Trust, 802.1x environments. And those were, I think you probably were part of some of those. Those were really difficult. There's a printer that no longer works. There's different things. And you literally had to either go by floor or building by building kind of structure to be able to do it. It hasn't really changed. Same functionality to there. You take on small pieces. There is not a big bang approach to Zero Trust to use it in a full deployment across the board. So figure out the architecture, get help, and just understand it is a technology. It's not a product. It's not a service. It's not something else. It is a technology that we want to leverage and be able to use. So you have to understand it, but you have to customize it for your organization and your infrastructure that you have today. That you don't want to go out and buy all new hardware. So figure out what you have and how it works and can it work in those environments that are there, and focus to get it as far deployed as that. But think about it as boundary layers or layers of an onion that you're peeling across. You got to get to the core, like Chase pointed out, where the data is, and that's where my goal is. So how do I keep going down those layers and continue? It's not something that I can flip a switch and then in 3 months I'm completely deployed in 170 locations around the world in Zero Trust. It is a small incremental step, and you got to orchestrate it pretty well. Otherwise you start having problems, and that will just slow or create headwinds for you that you're going to have to press against to keep getting it deployed. Oh, the last time we did this, we turned off a country, we turned off a facility that took us.
There are unintended consequences that it will deal with, and then those are probably what keeps, if not in security incidents, at least in the availability side up. So
self-inflicted. I don't have any toes anymore because I've shot them all off.
Probably Chase can share some of that experience too. So Chase, I know you have to go, so please feel free when you have to. But I would like to get some key nuggets from you in terms of the journey to Zero Trust, and what would your advice be for those that are starting off in this journey?
I think if you're starting off, the simplest thing right now to do, like this minute, is if you don't have it, go turn on some sort of out-of-band authentication on every account that you consider of value. Do that like ASAP. It's very, very simple. To give you an idea of just how effective that is, and I can't cite the specific study, but I did read it. You remember a few years ago when you used to go to the gas pump and you just zipped your card and you got gas, and then they put that thing in where you had to put in either your zip code or a PIN. The industry saw 94% plus loss of fraud in 30 days based on that one extra factor. So if you're looking for a 90% bump in your security apparatus, enable an out-of-band authentication. So like, it's not going to solve all your problems, but it solves a lot of the very, very, I guess you would say, simplistic ones. And then following on from there, I think really is having a good plan to move and migrate into cloud-enabled and cloud-focused technologies and starting to age off a lot of that archaic old stuff, because it's almost an impossibility in some systems to do segmentation, isolation, good visibility in systems that we built back in the 80s and 90s. In some cases, folks I've been dealing with the 70s, one of them the 60s. So like you move into that space and start doing that. And then the last thing I'd say is that you have to have a long-term plan and realize this is going to take time. You've dug yourself into a ditch, and we didn't do it with malice. We didn't do it with malicious intent. We did it because we were trying to do business. But we've dug ourselves into ditches, and it's going to take time to dig ourselves out of that ditch. And the only way you do that is with focused effort, long-term vision, strategic execution, and just continue digging. If you stop digging, guess what? You're still in the ditch. You're just in a slightly larger ditch. So you've got to work your way to get out of there.
Yeah, and absolutely. It is a process. It's better be a process than not, right? Otherwise, I think you cannot really, as you said, flip the switch and get a Zero Trust environment stood up in like no time.
Yeah, I totally agree. But there's also things such as you have to kind of re-engineer portions of processes that you have. Help desk is a perfect example. If people can't connect to something, so what do? They call the help desk. Well, that kind of used to fall back into just a couple of areas that were there. But now Zero Trust can come into that play of like maybe an IP address change, maybe a automated firewall rule changed or a microsegmentation thing. They're on a different network and they don't have access to that because you didn't figure it out. But those processes have to be engineered as well when you're doing this, because that visibility that we once had is gone away, that says, oh, it's a flat network. Can you ping this address? Can you talk to this address? What would normally work in that process now is broken, or or fixed, depending on which perspective you want to use. But you have to build in all those little nuances and things around those items, because all it takes is something to have changed, and that ripple effect across the organization will ripple very quickly on that side of it that's there. And everybody's looking to go, why isn't this talking? It's like all the wires are plugged in, everything's else, it's not working. There's something blocking it between there, but there's not a firewall, or maybe there is. And those are things that really are stumbling blocks sometimes, because those are like the last things that people are thinking of, and not in the normal process that goes, oh, this is going to change this, this is going to change this. That's why I say involve everyone that you can, get big teams up, because it does reach in. The tentacles of Zero Trust reach into every corner of IT organizations and operations functions that are in an organization that's there, and people need to be aware.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think, I just keep going back to kind of the basics for a lot of these discussions, because I think this has caught on the market as a buzzword. Everybody's trying to position themselves as a zero trust product or a vendor, or both from a services as well as product side. And it's very difficult to distinguish between what's real and what's not. And then so the next question I have that's been on my mind is, what part of this is reusable and what is not? So for example, if we're talking about advanced authentication with multi-factor and now going into passwordless, right? You still have to deal with the Active Directory infrastructure that's out there, the ADFS that's on top of it, many cases, and then the whole multi-factor authentication backwards, right?
Yeah, you really have to. You're dealing with different things, and you're trying to do it similar to the password world of, hey, we're seamless, we don't have to do anything. But you also change the way people operate in some of those cases. So yes, if I turn on multi-factor, all of a sudden, well, what's good multi-factor? Is it an authenticator app on your phone? Is it an authenticator app on your PC? Yeah. Because, well, the PC is no longer multi-factor. The PC is making a request, and oh yeah, the PC is giving the response. Is that 1.5? Is that okay? Or is that right, like 2?
Yeah, that's what like intrigues me when you have like, okay, we sent a code to your email and I'm on the same browser. Like I got it, and most of the times it's going to be, my auto password filled up. So
you're back in. So you really have to kind of understand and build policy and things around that. But it's one of the things that I don't try to re-engineer things. Take things that you can use, take things that are familiar for the organization, because it's going to be a lot of change. And like I said, bite-sized pieces of things that are there. Data centers by themselves, first internal and then external. You can figure out deployment scenarios when you involve the right people. But I think it's one of the things you want to add familiarity. I don't want to change everybody's way of doing things, because all that's going to create is that tsunami that's going to come back at you of like, oh, I can't do anything now, and they're going to blame it on Zero Trust.
Yeah,
on that side of it that's there, and it won't be the buzzword, or it won't be the new word for RSA next year or something like that. It will be like, oh no, we changed it to -1 trust. We don't trust anything.
Trust, like
so
that could be possible, right? If the availability goes down, then you are on the negative.
You are on the negative.
Because the bottom line for the business is right there, right?
Yeah, you're impacting everything at some levels. Think about it. Authentication is how people work. If I don't authenticate, nothing works. They're kind of like ransomware. So you're your own best ransomware on the side of it. Except I'm not offering anything unless I need kind of budget. Then I pony up the CEO. Oh, it's ransomware. We need to pay $1 million, and I'll take care of it.
Oh, you'll be, I don't know. You'll be surprised, but I would say, I have been surprised in many cases. Most of the time, it's like business will say, okay, give the money, let's get back in business. Zero Trust or not doesn't matter at this point, right?
We need back in business. We need functionality, and you don't want to because it's one of those things, and I learned that from like 8021X deployments and everything else. It's really hard to back out of these things.
Yeah.
And then you basically undo all the work that you just spent, usually a weekend doing. And you give up kind of on Sunday at midnight, and you're like, oh no. So you back everything else, and guess what? You're at it again the next weekend. Or maybe the CEO said, no, we're not doing this again. Too disruptive. Figure out a smaller way.
I mean, you're basically taking yourself back many steps than
Yeah,
you
and that's why I said it's kind of like get foundations, get easy wins, get things in there, because if you don't get those wins to show how it's effective on that, that's there. And I think no one's talked about it, but I think metrics are a part of that. If you were able to come back, like Chase pointed out, it's like, hey, we got a 94% reduction in attacks based on that since we turned multi-factor on. Big metric to use on a board deck, senior leadership, or anything else, and it's a win for you. You get that win, and you just stack those a couple of times, and then you can go down the merry way. No one's going to stand up and do it, but if you get loss after loss after loss, you kind of look like the Chicago Bears on a given Sunday on that side of it that's there, and you're like, oh, well, we thought we were winning, but we're not anymore. So you kind of run that backwards on that side.
But the winning cannot be accidental, right? You have to plan some of those winnings, and that's where the whole program approach comes, right?
Yeah.
Programmatically, and I think for both junior and senior people, I would say we are caught up in different waves of this. If you're already rolling out an authentication mechanism, advancing that, you're already in that journey. I mean, don't try to get on this bus again because you're already on
Don't exit the bus and get on the subway and go. It'll take you twice as long. It's like I would much prefer a direct flight somewhere than 5 stops along the way. And I think that's the key side of it, is that you don't want to have those connections. And if you've already made kind of commitments, changing that may be okay, but at the same time is like, at what cost is it okay? Does it cost me 2x as much, or is it cheaper, or is it much smoother or much more frictionless for my end users? That could be a win. But if it is all, I'm just adding overhead to everything, you're not going to be able to win on those cases.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, I mean, this is I would say conversation to be continued, not just amongst us, but I think expanding to business and understanding the business value of doing this in a zero trust environment.
I think the good thing is that the marketing that's been generated by zero trust is very similar to ransomware, cybersecurity, and the need. They see it in the government's ways of saying you have to deploy zero trust in environments, executive order. And so they're aware of it. So that problems that you used to have on trying to jump the executive leadership committee with new technology, they're already asking you about this technology. So you already had a win just by saying, we're moving to zero trust. Good.
Absolutely right.
So
right,
yeah, 3/4 of my job is done at that point.
Because you don't have to sell the idea
I don't
anymore.
have to sell it and convince some people that are like, oh, okay, and try to explain it in 2 slides or less of what zero trust actually is.
I think, and I'm surprised the way it caught on and the timing of it, because you have ransomware situations, and then you have the zero trust as maybe as a countermeasure.
Sure.
And we have been saying this for a long time, but I think that resonated very well with the business, and businesses love that we have something to tell them, right?
Never let a good incident go to waste. Never let a good marketing term go to waste either.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation. I know we lost Chase a little bit, but definitely something to be continued, and I think this will be probably where we'll start from in the next year as we go forward.
If you're not looking at zero trust today, you need to, plain and simple. And if you haven't planned on doing it or starting to integrate with it, you're behind the 8 ball on that side of it. You're already late. So you're already project's late. So you should at least start exploring it. Get familiar with it, get comfortable with it, because it's super complicated no matter what the vendors try to make it. But you're going to need trial and error to make it work. You're going to need deployment scenarios to see how it works in your environment. And you're going to need that as you're going forward to it to make it run flawlessly in your environment that's there. Otherwise, it's just going to be kind of a nightmare of things going up and down and things around that with that if you're just trying to rush it too fast or you don't have experience with the technology that you're leveraging at the different layers on that side of it that's there.
Yep, well said. Well, all right, that's where we say concluding CFF 2021.
Yes,
And
thank
I
you.
think that will resonate many longer. But stay on with us, Richard. We got some work to do. And for those joining us online as with us, we are going to invite this group and the rest of the group to San Antonio. And Marcel, before he goes, he's going to take on the baton. It's a relay race, right? We go from one year to the other.
Okay, there we go. We throw things at you. Hand off.
Yes.
I just won't drop it.
There you go. As long as you don't drop the baton, we're
Yeah,
good.
good deal. So, want to join us, Harold, Dave? So for those joining us online and those in the room, I mean, this has been a very intense couple of days of exercise, but thoroughly, I'm sure those who have been with us thoroughly enjoyed this. We have, I mean, we couldn't have done or chosen a different or a better place. But that's going to be probably the example that's set for San Antonio next year. So Marcel, on behalf of CFF and my brothers and friends here, Harold and Dave, and our CISO community leader, Richard, we are looking forward to going to San Antonio, carrying on this message, taking it to the next level, and hope to see you there.
Val, thank you. Looking forward to it.
And we want to thank Stephanie too for being here with you the whole time. Yeah. So before we go, because I know you've got to jump to the airport, we want to thank a few people. First, we want to thank Nick and his new bride, Rebecca. They have been manning the welcome desk, and that's what everyone's calling it, the welcome desk, and behind the scenes with technology. Kalol has been 24/7 behind this. It's just been fantastic what you have accomplished with this. Leah and Catherine Thompson have just been doing amazing work for us. And this is Stephanie Garcia with Port San Antonio, who's been here. I think her job was to keep you in line, right? Other way around. Okay, you're keeping her in line. Very good. So we're just so grateful for all of you and for all of the support. Yeah.
So I would like to call upon our host also, and I'm glad that Eric has been with us for the entire duration of the sessions, been on all of them, and couldn't thank you more, Eric.
Yes,
thank you
guys.
so much. Thank you so much.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
So the passing the baton.
How do we get one of those? All
Good
right.
deal. All right. So thank you again. Thank you for those who joined us online. We got so many positive feedback and comment that we are probably work on for one after the other, and those sessions went really back to back. So thank you all for joining. So,
But before we say goodbye, another round of applause, please, for the Georgia Cyber Center. Everyone connected here. It's been fantastic. And from Governor Deal through the chancellor of the university, Eric. It's been fantastic, and we can't wait to come back here. We're looking for the next opportunity. But also, I want everyone here, and I want to ask everyone online. And I think the way you do this online, I'm going to coin a new phrase. Just to type in a bunch of capital O's into your chat, and please give a standing ovation for Val for all the work that he has done. All right, come on. Standing O, come on. Yeah, there you go. All right.
no, thank you. Couldn't have been without a great team like Catherine and Leah and Nick, Kalol, Rebecca joined us, been like great part of the team. Tad, we found you, and anyone and everyone who's contributed into this. So thank you so much. All right, good deal. Oh, it was designed that way that 5:30 flight people can catch. So I think hopefully it worked out well. Yeah.